Hello and welcome to another edition of Conversations with Kevin Chrisom on Milton Access Television. I am your host, Kevin Chrisom, and today I'll sit down with Milton's town moderator, Bob Hiss, to discuss all things town meeting, his role as the moderator, and so much more. Our show starts now, so let's go have a conversation. Hello, my friends, and thank you for joining us here on Conversations on Milton Access TV. Well, since May of 2016, Bob Hiss has served as Milton's town moderator, overseeing the 279-member body tasked with voting on town department budgets, spending requests, bylaw changes, and so much more. Elected every 3 years, the role of the moderator is to almost, as some have described it, be a referee. From facilitating debate, making rulings, maintaining order and decorum, and so much more, the moderator keeps the proceedings moving so the business of the town can continue uninterrupted. A self-described software products guy, Bob also is a past Milton youth soccer coach and scout leader and is very involved with St. Michael's Episcopal Church in Milton. And with a special town meeting set to take place at the end of February, well, we figured who better to join us on this edition of Conversations than that of the man who runs his own type of show, Milton's town moderator, Bob Hiss. Mr. Moderator, thanks so much for joining us here on Conversations today.
Thank you very much. People like saying Mr. Moderator. It's got a nice alliteration to it. So,
well, as a town meeting member, I'll start to get into the habit of saying that.
There we go.
So we look forward to the special town meeting. But thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Part of the reason I wanted to have you on today, we'll talk a little about the special town meeting coming up. But I think for a lot of people, so you're on the ballot every 3 years. And for people that go to the ballot, I'm sure a lot of them who don't pay attention to the proceedings of town meeting often scratch their head and say, what the heck is town moderator? So how did you get here? Why did you want to be town moderator? And we'll start with that.
I got here because I was first asked to serve on the Town Government Study Committee, which was probably formed 15 years ago or so. And I was serving with Rick Neely and John Cronin, and I had run for town meeting around that time. And 9 years ago, Brian Walsh had announced that he was going to retire as moderator after 14 years, plus 7 years on the school committee. And so a few people approached me, Bob, you might consider running for moderator, because I'd spoken on the floor, I was comfortable doing it, I'd run meetings before. And so I threw my hat in the ring, won that first election, and that's how I got to be town moderator.
Well, that's great. And here we are 8.5 years later.
That's right.
And still a lot different from, obviously you were elected pre-COVID time, and now post-COVID, things were a little bumpy along the way, but we got through it, and we'll walk through that journey a little bit. But let's fast forward 8.5 years ago when you decided to run for moderator. Talk us through that process. How does one campaign for moderator and get people to support who, obviously you have town meeting members that are supporting you, but majority of the town is non-town meeting members as well.
Right.
How does that come together?
Right. Well, I actually talked to a few friends that had been involved in town campaigns, and this friend went on for about 15 minutes, and I just wrote down everything she said and then did it, which included, one, you got to go pull papers, and for townwide, you got to get 50 signatures, 60 to make sure you've got enough. Right. You file those with the town clerk. If you're going to raise money, you've got to file a form to form a committee, and you've got to get a treasurer, because the candidate, if they're going to raise different money, can't touch their own. If you're going to fund it yourself, you don't need to do that. If it helps to form a committee, if you think you're at a real competitive race, you can get some advice and guidance. And then the long list included finding a printer, 4 yard signs, standout signs, a team to help you assemble the standout signs, with the big 6-foot poles we all see. You have asked people to hold house parties where neighbors would come to someone and they'd have out some refreshments. You get to know people in that neighborhood, talk about why you're running, what you want to do. There would be one or many fundraisers. You've got to consider social media. Then it was primarily Facebook. Instagram wasn't quite as prevalent. Now you could consider Twitter. There were advertisements, the Milton Times being one. You could look at the School Shopper. And then there were various bodies. You can go to the neighborhood associations, like East Milton Neighborhood was active. The Blue Hill Neighborhood Association was active. There was I think 5 debates, so wow. I think those were 2, plus the one that was sponsored by, at that time, I think it was the Milton Times, where they had the candidate debates. There was probably a couple other things at Fuller Village. So you do all of those things, and then there's door knocking. And there are 9,000 homes, and I don't have time for, I was working full-time then, still am. You don't have time for 9,000 homes. So you pull the active voter list, and who are the people that regularly vote, maybe 15 to 25% of the time. You organize them into streets. You then have material you're going to hand out. So you print up a little handheld flyer, and you start figuring who is likely to perhaps support you. And you can get some advice and data on that. Right. And you just go out in the cold of March and April, and you start working shoe leather and knocking on doors. And most people are very kind. Some said, sorry, Bob, I'm voting for the other guy. I said, that's fine. But most people, probably 80% of them know what it is, and 20, 25% don't. Right. So it's a chance to educate. So it's a lot of work to go get elected to townwide office.
Oh, it certainly is. And for town moderator in particular, it's, select board is one thing where people often see it and they know of it. But for moderator, when you're out knocking on doors, or when you were out knocking on doors, what is your campaign points, your message, your strategy in connecting some of these voters to bring them to your side and get them to elect you?
I thought about some promises I wanted to go make. I actually wrote down a list, and I looked at it the other day, of about 20 things. I think I've accomplished 17, maybe 18 of them. But I said technology is coming. We should look at things like electronic voting. I was looking for ways to make town meeting more efficient, and I introduced the consent agenda, which lets us pass a large number of non-controversial articles. In some years, it's been 26 or 27 articles. Yeah. You're welcome for that. I wanted to introduce students to the civics of town government. And so I've introduced to Pierce a mock town meeting. They've had a couple now. COVID interrupted that. We were going to get going back in 2019. We were moving into the 2020 year, so it got stalled for about 3 or 4 years, so I wanted to do that. I wanted to educate people about the town, so I had a pre-town meeting show. And also the moderator appoints between 7 and 10 different committees, depending on what's active. And I did a full analysis of everybody that had been appointed, looking at what I call kind of the 4 Ps, which are precinct, the person, the profession, and kind of the personality. Sure. And I found there was a lot of lack of diversity of those different demographics. So I wanted to make sure we had a balance of men and women, because the town has more women than men if you look at the voter list, right. Like 53-47. I wanted to make sure we had balance of political parties. I wanted to make sure all the precincts had people. I was looking at ethnic and demographic background and professions and domain skills. So you've got different skills for the Board of Appeals than you have for the Warrant Committee, than you have for the Personnel Board, et cetera. So those are the things I said I would go do, is efficiency, some technology, and bring, I guess, a broad diversity, not just diversity of appearance with a single thought, but real broad diversity across all the different kinds of people we have here in town. That's
great. Well, obviously the citizens accepted that, and you were elected and sworn in as the moderator, and 8.5 years ago, as we mentioned. What was it like your first time being up there? You were a town meeting member, so it's different. As we joked off air, you're up there alone in the podium, and it's Milton High School auditorium, but it feels a lot different, I'm sure, than your usual auditorium. What's that like? The first feeling when you got there as moderator?
Well, you get a little nervous, little stage fright and anxiety. But I've been in front of large groups before and spoke before them. And so once you get the first words going, everything calms down. I benefited from having been a town meeting member and watched Brian operate effectively for, I think, 6 or 7 years. So I knew what the rhythm and flow was. Since he knew he was going to retire, he started working with me fairly early, laying out, here are the different materials you have to prepare. Here, for example, the church leaders that come through the invocation, consider inviting the schools for singing the national anthem. Right. So here's the mechanics of it. And then walking through the prep meeting we do with the select board and the chairs of the various committees, the town clerk, town council, to go through all the articles and make sure it's going to run smoothly, because the primary thing is we want to avoid surprises that are going to stop the meeting or cause confusion to the members or to the citizens, et cetera. So Brian was really helpful in getting me through that. And then you get to snuggle up with town meeting time and read through, in effect, the custom version of Robert's Rules we have here in the New England states.
Just some light reading for you, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Brian Walsh, who served as your predecessor and served for many years as town moderator. Some of the advice that he left you when you took over, and obviously Brian still serves as a town meeting member, so he's a good asset, I'm sure, that you'll call upon. But what is the best piece of advice you think that your predecessor left to you?
He said, if you're unsure, just pause. Because you're up there live, on stage, on TV, and you want to make the right call.
Right.
And when it's your first night or your second night, although you'd been through, I'd been through multiple town meetings before, something new can occur. And so having a discussion with town council, with John Flynn at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So pause and speak to John and get some advice. Or Brian said, call on me at some point. And Brian would say, yeah, we had this 3 years ago, this event. How did you rule on it? We ruled this way. What was the logic? Well, this was the logic. Okay, so now I've got precedent to follow. So go take 5 minutes and with some experts and get it right.
Right.
And then, because that's going to be a lot more effective for the members and the citizens than an ineffective ruling that just is going to get everybody confused, more questions and chaos.
Correct.
So that was the best advice.
Well, I'm sure a good asset, and I'm sure you're calling him quite a bit.
Yeah, he's a good friend, and still serving now as the Fire Station Building Committee. Brian has given decades to our town here. Yeah,
that's great. So your first town meeting, May of 2016, 4 years go by, things are looking good, and then a global pandemic happens and upends everything, not just here in the United States, but of course the country, and upends town meeting as well. What were the early stages like of the process of moving to an all Zoom, all virtual town meeting? I remember, I think you may have discussed trying to do it outdoors, but you had to scrap that. That didn't work. Talk us through that process and your role as a moderator in that.
Well, it was a clean sheet of paper, and I'm an active member of the Mass Moderators Association. Mm-hmm. So the first was we did work through the legislature to enable legislation signed by Governor Baker to permit a remote town meeting. However, they would not permit it for the open town meeting. So they're the ones that went outdoors and to the parking lots and that kind of thing. But the representative town meetings were permitted because we were a smaller, manageable group.
Correct.
So first had to get the legislation through, and the governor moved quickly on that. Second, I was part of a committee of about 5 of us who are in representative town meetings, RTM across the Commonwealth, and we got together and started designing how will this work. For example, our town didn't have the Zoom licenses we have today. Mm-hmm. There were choices, and Zoom was just starting to take off, but WebEx was out there, other technologies. So which technology do we pick? Then of all the features, once you get Zoom in there, how do you replicate all the different aspects of the town meeting now in an entirely virtual setting? How do people raise their hands? Who do we recognize? How do we validate that when someone logs in, they are who they say they are? Because that's critical. We only want the RTM's members to be able to vote. How do we broadcast and display articles? How do we display amendments? How do we take them from the floor? So you had to virtually represent everything in this virtual world that has happening in the physical world and think it all through. So it was Mike Lynch and Rob Mallett of IT and Susan Galvin and Gail Neville and me, and we started going through how is everything going to happen, and then I would consult with the committee I was on with at the Mass Moderators, and then we went through dry runs, and then we had to make sure we had valid email addresses. Mm-hmm. And that's not always right because people have 2 or 3 email addresses. And then we had to get them Zoom registered. All that stuff had to be figured out.
And some of them use phones as well instead of logging into their computer, correct?
And that's right. We had to get Zoom Chromebooks out to some members that didn't have personal computers. Wow. So it's the details that had to be worked out so that when people logged in, it was going to work. And I think it did.
So you must have been one happy camper that 3 years later you will be able to be back in person.
Quite. Because it takes 5 or 6 people to run a remote virtual town meeting, not virtual, on Zoom. And there are many more things the moderator is watching. Mm-hmm. You're watching for hands coming up. You're getting a wave from Susan. There's somebody that shouldn't be on the meeting. I don't understand. You have to stop the meeting and validate that. Right. You're orchestrating like a small band conductor now instead of the one-man band. Right. You're now managing a group.
Correct.
It's much, much more mentally intensive to do it that way.
Well, in typical Milton fashion, you got it done and above water as well. So
thank you.
Well done on that. And I'm sure we don't look back at that and move forward and happy to be back in person as well.
Well, unfortunately, though, there is legislation that has been filed with the state to permit now potentially a hybrid town meeting for open and representative. And that's going to be extremely difficult.
Oh, for sure.
Because we do have electronic voting, which I also helped introduce to the town. But how do you authenticate that someone is who they say they are. I mean, really know, how do you prevent someone from grabbing a phone and now pretending to be someone at home voting? How do we do the voting technology? Because we have in-office clickers now. Or how do we merge Zoom with the voting technology? There's going to be a whole new difficult design process I'm going to have to go through in the next term. So,
have they consulted the Mass Moderators Association on that?
Yes, we have kind of a legislative affairs group,
Sure.
and they're in touch with the authors of that.
Okay.
And we're trying to hopefully say, please don't do that yet.
Right.
It's going to happen, but the security of the technology is really not there.
No.
So, you know, we're the 6 states in New England, the only ones that do this.
Right.
It's a 350, 400-year-old tradition. It's almost unique in the world. We don't want to screw it up, and we want to make it safe and effective for all the things we're trying to do. And
Milton is one of 50 towns or so that still has a representative form of government. Is that number correct, or is it shrinking?
No, it's actually, it grows, it ebbs and flows a little bit. For example, I think about 6 to 8 years ago, Framingham moved from representative town meeting to city. There are large towns. Once a town crosses 10,000 voters, they start to think about it. I've got friends who have 5,000 and 6,000 people come to an open town meeting, spanning across all the schools, all the auditoriums. You know, so that gets to be quite unwieldy on big issues.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so it takes a town charter, but there's study committees all across the Commonwealth that are looking at both. Should I go to a city, or should I go to a representative town meeting?
We've had some of our neighbors to the south, Randolph, Braintree, and Weymouth, in the past 20 years move on from that type of government and move to either a mayor council or a manager council form of government as well. How often are you in contact with your fellow moderators across town, particularly here in the South Shore region?
In a couple ways. We have an annual meeting. I'm on the board of directors, so we have monthly meetings. I'm in regular contact with, we have a gavel line. It's kind of a moderator help desk. You can put out a situation and comment on it. I'm part of an expert panel if people want to have a private one-on-one, because I've been doing this, even though it's 9 years, it's like dog years. I've probably done 57 nights, and most open town meeting members do 1 night a year. So I've got the equivalent of 57 years of meeting experience, so to speak. So I'm in touch quite a bit, which is fun, because you get to learn what more experienced people have done, different situations they've faced, and have a nice sounding board where you can check out an idea and get a question answered.
Oh, for sure. And most, if not all, are elected, correct, moderators, at least in the representative form of government?
All the moderators are elected. I don't know of any appointed anymore, which used to be, or they were elected at the meeting.
Right.
And it's either 1 year or 3 years now across the Commonwealth.
Okay, very good. Let's talk about, we're going to get into town meeting a little bit, because I know you have your own preview show to do, so I'm not going to I'm not going to stomp on that. But you know, obviously the select board appoints several committees in town, but the moderator as well. Obviously the warrant committee is chief among them. Talk about that process. I know you talked a little bit about it when you took over as moderator, but what is your real thought process, and is it different appointing the warrant committee, your thought process, and the school building committee? What are you looking for when people come and you get to appoint committees?
I looked the other night, there's about 50 boards and committees. I think 6 or so are elected, you know, parks, library, select, et cetera. Depending on the season, what's going on, the moderator appoints 7 to 10, because there's some temporary ones that exist. What I do is I start with a list of all the active voters, because you have to be an active voter in town to be considered. And I get the census data, so I understand where their precinct is, so I'm looking balance of representation across the town. I'm looking for domain skills. So for example, for the planning board, the Board of Appeals, it's largely attorneys, but now I'm in search for an engineer that can help with some of these complex 40Bs. On the personnel board, I was going for human resources representatives. So I look for domain skills and precinct. Third, I like a male-female balance. You can't do that on a small committee like the personnel board as easily, but I certainly can on the larger committees like the warrant committee. And then I look for political party, the Ds and the Rs and the unenrolled, because I want to have some balance of viewpoints. Because it's a broad town, you know, where our things get voted on 55-45 when they go out there, so you want some balance on the committee so it doesn't swing one way or another. And then I come up with a long list, and I start, as I say, dial for dollars. So I will call people or email people and say, hey, I want to have a discussion with you. And I start feeling them out for their interest. Have they served on boards and committees? Have they been in contentious situations? How do they resolve things with themselves? Are they ready for the time commitment? And I've been lucky. I get a lot of volunteers. So in almost all my committees, I've got 2 times or 3 times the volunteers as I have available slots every year. So
that's a good thing.
I'm lucky. Yeah,
that's great.
A lot of talent here in town. Yeah.
Excellent. Before we get to the special town meeting preview, I want to talk to you about, you mentioned electronic voting. Talk us through the process. Why did you want to bring it to town meeting, and the success of it so far?
Yep. One, it has started to creep into towns across the Commonwealth. And so I had been talking to other moderators about it. Then when COVID hit, we were doing electronic voting now.
Right.
So I think everybody got comfortable with it. And I said, okay, when we come back out, that's the time to introduce the concept of electronic voting. And so I formed a study committee. And I'd actually done it right before COVID. And they came out and they said, we like the idea, but there's some resistance to it and we shouldn't spend the money. So I kind of shelved it until we got into COVID. When COVID came out, since everybody was now comfortable with the electronic voting, I said, now is the time. So I took that plan from the electronic voting study committee and I presented it to the members, asked for some money, and it was authorized. We went through a vendor search. And as I explained to the members, I thought the benefits were, one, we could eliminate the contentious standing votes when someone disputes the voice call of the moderator. We can eliminate the roll call votes, which could last an hour and a half, hour and 10 minutes, because now we can just display it right up there. Third, we are representatives, and I believe the citizens have a right to know how are their representative members voting on things. And it can speed things up because of those process improvements of eliminating some of the objections to the vote now. So for all those reasons, I laid them out, and I think it passed like 70-30 or 75-25 by the members, and we adopted it right after COVID.
And fellow town meeting members, they've spoken highly about it to you?
So far?
The feedback?
Yep. Yeah. We put new batteries in every time. We test every single device. We run a test with every member so they know how it works. We ask them not to play with any buttons. And it is working, I think, well right now.
That's great. All right, so let's talk about, in the final 5 minutes here of the show, let's talk a little about the special town meeting coming up at the end of the month here in February. What's on the docket? What can we expect as we gather in Milton High once again for, some like to say, the greatest show in Milton?
That's right.
Town
so
meeting.
It's Monday, February 24, 7:30 at the high school. And it's called by the select board because they've got a number of items that have come up. There are 13 articles that are coming from the select board, the planning board, and then there's 2 more coming from citizens petitions. So this will range from, they're addressing liquor licenses. There are items from the planning board on the accessory dwelling units, which have now been enabled statewide by the legislature. How does Milton respond? There's some tuning up to the Milton overlay district, the historical district concept. There is money for renovating part of the Cunningham and Collie Scott schools to eliminate shortage. There is money for the school building committee to continue forward with their design process. There's an article to expand it by 5 members to comply with a regulation for the state. If you want to go apply for state funds, there are certain positions that have to serve on it. And they're all going to be appointed by named position, the select board, the school superintendent, I think, things like that. And then the 2 citizens petition, there's a simple one. One is requesting that the planning board start to develop a plan that is going to be compliant with the MBTA zoning for this May town meeting. Now that's interesting because town meeting, citizens can ask town meeting to do it. Town meeting can vote on it, but town meeting as an elected body can't command a different elected body like the planning board to do something. But what it can serve is, it's a sense of the town for the planning board and the town meeting. And the second one is an interesting one. It's, there are 200 citizens, and I think the lead signatory, I think according to the town clerk, is Erin Bradley, because I think she turned, one of the select board members, she turned in the paperwork.
Interesting.
So what the citizens are asking is, they're saying select board stand down from contesting the MBTA ruling. And what they want to do is reduce the funds, the legal budget of the town, and then transfer those funds to the school budget. So the select board really doesn't have a choice in what to vote once or up or down on that. So that goes into the warrant. Now both of those are going to the warrant committee like every other article does. And then the warrant committee is now going to consider those two articles like the other 13 and make a recommendation for us.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I'm sure in those citizens petitions we'll have hotly contested debates. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, correct? That is the 3 days we have the auditorium for at least the first week?
I'll check on the Tuesday. Usually it's Monday, Wednesday,
Right. I thought they
Friday.
said in the select board meeting they had it for a Tuesday this year, but
I'll check that
we'll
in the...
definitely confirm that. And you'll be back on, obviously, Milton Access TV to do a full preview for
Yes.
Town Hall, for the town meeting. So
We'll do.
we look forward to that.
But I'm going to try to get through in one night. I mean,
Good. Well, we hope
try
that. Let's hope. That'd be great.
In
That'd be a great
2017,
thing, yeah.
I got through 52 articles in one night.
That's
So
tremendous.
it's up to the members. We can do it if they
great.
want to.
That's
So.
great. In the final minute and a half here, again, I want to thank you for coming on. You're running for re-election, correct?
I am,
Very
yes.
good. What is there left to do in your mind? If you were elected to get another 3-year term, what more would you like to see to town meeting?
I think we're going to have to navigate this hybrid town meeting process.
Right.
I'm not sure it'll be stopped. That's going to be difficult. It's going to be a difficult process to design, difficult technology to work out. There's going to be an education process. I'll have to work with the other mass moderators who I know well.
Right.
So, and I'm an IT guy. I work I run a software business for Accenture. So, and I've done it once with COVID, so I want to go do that again. And the second, I've become increasingly concerned with kind of the factionalism of town meeting. We've seen the emergence of slates of town meeting candidates.
That's correct.
I'm disappointed by that because there are a lot of hardworking members who have put out individual effort, and it seems to be overwhelmed by these slates of candidates. So I want to make sure we maintain decorum. I'm here today to say I hope we don't see another slate this time, because all that's going to do is create a competing slate, and it'll be like an escalating arms race. So I think it's a bad idea for our representative town meeting form of government. And I hope to, if it does happen, then I'll have to manage, I think, a contentious town meeting process as the two slates emerge, and we'll see how they behave. Our RTM members are well behaved, and I'm proud of their behavior and the work they do. So I want to help them continue to go maintain those high standards.
No doubt about it. Mr. Spiner, we're flat out of time. We could do a part 2 of this. Come back and see us anytime, because there are a lot more questions to I want to ask you about the process of town meeting. That's all right. This was a tremendous interview. So again, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
And look forward to watching your show as well on Milton Access TV to preview town meeting, and we'll see you at town meeting as well.
Very good. 7:30 the 24th.
We'll be there. Thank you. My thanks to all of you for joining us on this edition of Conversations. As a reminder, you can watch any episode of Conversations online at miltonaccesstv.org or on our MATV YouTube page. And for all of us here at Milton Access Television, I'm Kevin Chrisom. Thank you for watching.
Three, two, one.